how much of your sales pipeline is evaporating right now, like today, because your reps are treating every buyer's concern like some kind of argument they just have to win?
Oh, yeah. That's a lot.
Right. I mean, think about that for a second. You're a sales leader, a hiring manager, maybe an executive, and you look at your CRM dashboard at the end of the month.
And it's just a sea of red.
Exactly. You see these deals stalling out, slipping to the next quarter, or just, dying entirely. And you ask your reps what happened, and they give you the exact same tired excuses.
Yeah, they didn't have budget.
Right. No budget. Or the competitor came in 20% cheaper.
It's a painful reality for a lot of revenue leaders right now. I mean, it really is.
Right.
And usually the instinct from management is to just push the team harder.
Yeah.
Like to teach them more aggressive rebuttals, to arm them with these 20-page battle cards of clever comebacks for every conceivable objection.
Which is exactly what we are dismantling today in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We are looking at a newly published, really comprehensive 5-step framework from the researchers at the Sales Experts.
Mm-hmm.
And they analyzed thousands of stalled deals. And their core mission today, what we're going to get into, is to completely flip the script on how commercial teams handle objections.
Right, moving away from that high-pressure stuff.
Exactly, moving away from combative rebuttals and adopting a diagnostic methodology, because that actually drives genuine, repeatable sales success.
What's fascinating here is the core thesis of this entire approach.
Yeah.
Because objection handling is not about forcing a buyer to say yes.
Right.
It's the skill of slowing the conversation down. It's the mechanics of uncovering the truth. And crucially, it's about building the commercial maturity to realize that, sometimes the prospect simply isn't a fit.
Which goes completely against that old school, always be closing mentality that so many reps are just raised on.
Oh, absolutely.
As I was reading through this research, I kept thinking about a stated objection like a check engine light, on a car dashboard.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, like a prospect says, it's too expensive. That's just the light flashing.
Right.
But if your sales rep responds by immediately arguing the price, they are essentially just putting a piece of black electrical tape over the dashboard light.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. The warning is hidden, but the engine is still going to explode on the highway. You have to plug in the diagnostic tool to read the actual error code.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The stated objection is almost never the complete truth. I mean, it is just a symptom.
Right.
The real error code hiding underneath might be, I don't trust this software will actually integrate with our legacy systems.
Or like, I have no idea how I'm going to justify this to my boss.
Exactly. How do I show this to my board of directors without risking my own job?
Yeah.
If a salesperson just throws out a rebuttal to that first sentence without diagnosing the deeper concern, they end up trying to fix the transmission problem by changing the windshield wipers.
Right. Which doesn't work.
They lose the deal. Or worse, they force through a bad sales lead that just churns 3 months later anyway.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because how do we actually plug in that diagnostic tool and get the real error code?
Right.
The framework from the Sales Experts gives us 5 progressive steps, and the first 2 are entirely dedicated to diagnosis. So if our rep's natural instinct is to immediately defend the product, what's the mechanism to actually stop that reflex?
The mechanism is a forced intentional pause.
Okay.
Step 1 is to listen, pause, and acknowledge. The researchers make a profound point here, which is that the absolute fastest way to lose control of an objection is to respond to it too quickly.
Oh man, I can feel the anxiety of 1,000 sales reps just hearing that.
Yeah.
Because when a buyer throws up a wall, the rep's fight or flight response kicks in. They want to protect their deal.
Sure.
So they interrupt, they defend the price, they start vomiting a list of 14 different features to justify the cost.
And doing that only signals to the buyer that the rep is far more interested in talking than understanding. It turns a commercial consultation into a debate. I mean, the framework lists out specific reactive phrases that instantly trigger buyer defensiveness.
Oh, like what?
Phrases like, yes, but, or you've misunderstood, or actually our total cost of ownership is cheaper.
Hearing those phrases genuinely makes me cringe.
I know.
You can practically hear the buyer's emotional drawbridge just pulling up.
Because nobody likes being told they are wrong.
Right.
Especially by someone trying to take their money.
Exactly.
The framework suggests letting the buyer completely finish their thought. Then count to 3 in your head.
1, 2, 3.
Pause. And then acknowledge the concern without automatically agreeing to concede anything.
So what does that sound like?
A rep might say, "That makes sense. Can you tell me more about what feels expensive in this context?" Or maybe, "You are entirely right to examine the implementation timeline before making a decision."
I do want to push back on the mechanics of this, though.
Okay, sure.
Because doesn't a long, deliberate pause feel incredibly awkward? I mean, if a buyer looks a rep in the eye and says, your competitor is 20% cheaper, and the rep just sits there in silence for 3 seconds,
Yeah.
doesn't it look like they're a deer in headlights? Like the company simply doesn't have a good answer?
It only feels awkward to the salesperson, the one who is practically vibrating with the need to pitch.
Right, they just want to jump in.
But to the buyer, it feels like they are finally being heard. That pause isn't hesitation. It is a highly effective tactical tool. It diffuses the conversational tension.
Wow, okay.
It signals that you are actively processing their situation,
Yeah.
not just waiting for your turn to recite a memorized battle card.
Yeah.
Think about the difference between a doctor who thoughtfully reviews your chart and asks follow-up questions.
Versus one who just starts scribbling a prescription before you've even finished describing your symptom.
Ex-
You trust the diagnosing doctor, not the prescribing doctor. Which leads us into the second part of the diagnostic phase, right?
Yeah.
Once you've paused and acknowledged the symptom, how do you find the real error code?
By moving to step 2, which is clarify and isolate.
Isolate.
Yeah. The first objection a buyer gives you is essentially a rough draft. Before a rep can even think about presenting a solution, they have to ask targeted questions that make that vague concern specific. And more importantly, they have to test whether this is the singular barrier holding up the deal.
Isolation is such a critical concept here because the source material gives some fantastic examples of isolation questions. Things like, apart from the upfront costs, is there anything else preventing you from proceeding with this partnership today?
Right, because consider the alternative if a rep fails to isolate.
It's a nightmare.
A salesperson could easily spend 3 weeks wrangling their internal team, building this massive financial ROI model to resolve a stated price objection.
Right, they do all this work.
They proudly present it to the buyer, only for the buyer to say, "Oh, this financial model is great, but our legal team actually won't approve your data privacy terms anyway, so we can't move forward."
Oh man, all that effort wasted on a symptom. And you just brought up a really vital distinction from the research, which is the difference between a true objection and a condition.
Yes. This is huge. A condition is a genuine structural reality of the buyer's business.
Right.
If a prospect says, "We physically cannot sign this contract until our chief information security officer approves the data processing terms."
That is not an objection to be argued with.
No. A rep shouldn't launch into a passionate, persuasive speech about the ROI of the software to try and bypass the security team.
Right, you can't outpitch a legal requirement.
Exactly. It's a procedural requirement. It's a condition to be managed, not an objection to be overcome.
So you navigate a condition, but you diagnose an objection.
Precisely.
So let's assume we've plugged in the tool. We've paused, we've clarified, we've isolated the real issue, and we know it's a genuine objection. Let's say they simply don't believe the value justifies the price tag.
Okay.
How do reps pivot and address that without just immediately caving and throwing a massive discount at them?
That requires step 3, reconnecting the objection to value and the cost of inaction. And this is a crucial training area for sales leaders. Price objections are almost never solved by just defending the price tag itself.
Right, you have to shift the camera angle, stop focusing on what the solution costs, and force the buyer to look at what their unresolved problem is currently costing them.
Exactly. You return to the business outcomes you established much earlier in the sales process. The specific revenue they are bleeding out, the engineering hours being wasted.
The strategic board initiatives they're missing?
Yes. The framework outlines a brilliant psychological technique here, which is using the buyer's own evidence against their current status quo.
The example provided in the text illustrates this beautifully, I think.
Oh, the software one.
Yeah, where a buyer says, we simply cannot justify spending £60,000 on this platform.
Right.
And an average rep immediately starts listing features, trying to make the platform sound heavy enough to weigh £60,000.
Which never works.
Never works. But the strong rep says, that is a significant investment. But earlier in our evaluation, you and your team estimated that this operational bottleneck is delaying £25,000 of revenue every single month.
Right.
If we deploy this and recover even half of that, the platform pays for itself in 5 months. Is the concern that the return on investment is too low or that you aren't confident our team can actually deliver that result?
I mean, that is a masterclass in commercial reasoning.
It really is.
Notice how it doesn't dismiss the 60,000-pound price tag.
Yeah.
It validates the investment, but immediately contextualizes it against the buyer's own stated pain. And beautifully, that final question forces the buyer to review whether the barrier is actually the money, or if it's a fundamental lack of trust in the vendor's ability to execute.
It pushes the buyer to articulate the pain of their own status quo, asking them directly like, what happens to your quarterly targets if nothing changes during the next 6 months?
Right. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, even if you clearly prove the cost of inaction, the buyer might still hesitate.
Why?
Because step 4 tells us that objections often aren't just about financial metrics. They are expressions of personal and professional risk.
Oh, like fear.
Yes. The buyer is sitting across from you wondering, will my CEO fire me if I champion this new supplier and it fails?
Wow.
Or is this slick salesperson promising more than their engineering team can actually build?
It's the sheer terror of making a career-limiting mistake.
Exactly.
So when a buyer expresses that kind of risk, the answer from the sales rep cannot just be louder enthusiasm. It can't be, trust me, our support team is world-class.
Yeah.
It has to be tangible, credible evidence. Case studies, detailed implementation plans, legally binding service-level agreements.
And providing evidence requires precision. You have to match the specific evidence to the specific psychological risk the buyer is expressing.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, if a buyer is terrified about the implementation breaking their current tech stack, handing them a glossy case study about how a different client doubled their revenue doesn't help at all.
Right.
In fact, it makes them more anxious because it proves you aren't listening to their fear of the downside.
You're just trying to sell them.
Yeah. They need to see your technical onboarding timeline, your rollback procedures, and your dedicated resource allocation.
It kind of reminds me of the mechanics of martial arts.
So.
Instead of rigidly blocking the buyer's punch, which is their objection, you smoothly guide their momentum toward your evidence. You don't fight their anxiety, you validate it, and then slide the specific safety net they need right under them.
That's a great way to put it.
But I have to play devil's advocate here on the reality of modern procurement. If an aggressive buyer is demanding a 15% discount and the rep comes back and offers a phased implementation plan instead of a price drop, won't the buyer feel ignored and just walk away?
Well, that's a very real danger if the rep doesn't handle the commercial exchange properly.
Yeah.
However, the source material establishes a hard, non-negotiable rule for this exact scenario.
Yeah, which is?
Never discount immediately.
Never.
Never. When a rep instantly drops the price the second a buyer pushes back, they are actively teaching the buyer that the original price was artificially inflated. It completely destroys the vendor's credibility.
Right. It's basically confessing, yeah, I was trying to overcharge you, but you caught me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which ensures the buyer will now aggressively negotiate every single line item going forward because they simply don't trust your numbers.
Yeah.
The framework dictates that if the price must change, the underlying commercial structure must change alongside it.
You have to trade.
Yes. You trade price for scope, for contract length, for payment terms, or for volume. A rep might say, we can meet that budget figure, but to do so, we will need to limit the initial rollout to 2 departments instead of 5, or we need an annual upfront payment. This demonstrates flexibility and gives the buyer options to reduce their financial risk while fiercely protecting the integrity of your value.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the real issue. We've reconnected to the cost of inaction. We've reduced the psychological risk with precise evidence, and we've held firm on value.
Right.
And the buyer nods and says, okay, that makes sense. That sounds fine. We've won, right? Time to update the forecast.
Far from it.
Wait, really?
Yeah, and this exact moment is where so many massive deals slip at the 1-yard line.
Step 5.
Step 5 is confirming the answer and agreeing on the concrete next step. The research highlights a behavioral quirk here that is both hilarious and completely tragic.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
It notes that salespeople frequently deliver a remarkably strong, evidence-backed response to an objection, and then they succumb to nervous energy and just keep talking until they accidentally create a brand new objection.
The nervous over-explainer. I've done it. We've all done it. Every sales leader has listened to a call recording and watched a rep snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
It's painful to watch.
Because once you provide the targeted evidence, the rep must stop talking. and explicitly verify that the concern is genuinely resolved in the buyer's mind. You ask, how do you feel about that proposed timeline now? Or what else would your team need to see to verify this approach?
Because an objection is not resolved just because a buyer politely says, that sounds fine.
Right, right.
It is only resolved when the buyer agrees to a tangible next step that requires them to expend effort.
Like what kind of effort?
Like setting up a deep dive technical review with their engineers.
Okay.
Or completing a vendor security questionnaire. Or, crucially, bringing in the economic buyer.
Okay, let's define that term for a second because it's vital. The economic buyer isn't just a procurement manager. It's the ultimate decision maker who actually holds the purse strings. It's the person whose fundamental job is to validate that the overall return on investment objectively outweighs the organizational risk of making a change.
Exactly.
If you haven't agreed on a next step to involve them, the objection isn't truly handled.
Furthermore, executives and managers need to internalize a hard truth about Step 5. Sometimes the most profitable next step is to stop the sales cycle entirely.
Right. The strategic power of disqualification.
Through this diagnostic process, a rep might uncover that the buyer's problem simply isn't painful enough to warrant the cost of your solution.
Or they have a rigid mandate with no realistic budget attached.
Right. When that happens, the rep must have the professional courage to walk away. The article argues that a well-qualified no is infinitely more valuable to a business than carrying months of artificial bloated pipeline.
Yeah.
Continuing to handle objections when the fundamental business fit isn't there drains pre-sales resources and wastes everyone's time.
It just clogs up the CRM with fantasy deals that give the board false hope.
Yep. And speaking of the CRM, the source explicitly transitions into a playbook for how sales leaders should actually be coaching this framework. Because handing a rep a PDF of these 5 steps and expecting an overnight behavioral transformation is, quite frankly, management malpractice.
It requires rigorous, data-driven coaching. I mean, managers must stop relying on generic, abstract role plays.
Right.
The researchers suggest performing forensics on your CRM data. Leaders need to isolate the specific objections that are most frequently killing deals at their unique company and identify exactly where in the sales process those objections first rear their heads.
So you pull the actual call recordings, you find the exact timestamps where reps are interrupting buyers or defending their pricing prematurely.
Right.
Then you build an arsenal of targeted evidence and isolation questions for your company's 3 most common objections, and you role-play those exact hyper-specific scenarios.
Because the objective isn't to hand every salesperson a robotic, identical script to read from.
The objective is to elevate their underlying commercial reasoning, build their active listening stamina, and sharpen their diagnostic instincts.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The article provides a practical cheat sheet for those notorious everyday objections.
Oh, yeah.
For instance, the classic, just send me some information.
The absolute classic.
Right. How many times has an eager rep heard that on a cold call and enthusiastically emailed over a generic PDF, genuinely believing they advanced the deal?
It is the ultimate polite brush-off.
Yeah.
The framework advises reps to graciously agree, but immediately attach a qualifying condition.
Like what?
Like, I would be happy to send that over. To ensure I would just spam you with generic marketing material. Which specific area are you most interested in evaluating right now? Our commercial ROI, our implementation process, or how our architecture compares to your current setup?
Oh, that is brilliant. It forces the buyer to be specific.
Right.
And then the rep must lock down when and how that information will be reviewed, because blindly emailing material without a calendar commitment for a follow-up discussion is not a sales step.
No, it's not.
It's an administrative task.
Consider another classic hurdle. We are perfectly happy with our current supplier.
Oh, yeah.
The amateur instinct is to immediately attack or criticize the incumbent vendor.
Which instantly forces the buyer to defend the vendor because the buyer is likely the one who chose them in the first place.
Exactly. You're calling your baby ugly.
Yeah.
The professional rep shifts into diagnostic mode. They say, I'm glad to hear you have a stable partnership. What do they do particularly well for your team? If you had a magic wand and could improve just one aspect of that relationship, what would it be? When is your typical evaluation window for alternative suppliers?
Wow.
You are planting strategic seeds for a future opportunity rather than aggressively trying to force a rip and replace today.
It is an incredibly professional posture. It treats the buyer like an industry peer rather than a target to be conquered. So, What does this all mean for the leaders listening right now? Let's distill this research into 3 core actionable takeaways you can implement in your very next pipeline review. Number 1, stop letting your team treat buyer objections like personal attacks or debate club arguments to be won. Train them to view objections as diagnostic check engine lights. Drill the discipline to listen, pause, acknowledge, and isolate the real error code before they ever pitch a solution.
And number 2, ban the immediate discount. If a buyer pushes aggressively on price, your team must be trained on how to trade price for scope, contract length, or volume. Dropping the price the moment you face resistance destroys your credibility and trains the buyer to bleed you dry on every line item.
And number 3, push your team to master the cost of inaction. Price objections are rarely about the sheer size of the price tag. They are about a lack of perceived value. Reps must become fluent in using the buyer's own words and data to calculate exactly what it costs their business to maintain the painful status quo for the next 6 months. Now, if you are a sales leader or a hiring manager and you are looking to build a resilient team that doesn't panic at the first sign of commercial resistance,
Right.
a team truly capable of executing these complex diagnostic conversations, you need to dive deeper into this material. Every new sales lead your marketing team generates deserves a professional who knows how to navigate this exact framework.
Absolutely.
Visit thesalesexperts.com to learn how to recruit top-tier talent, objectively assess your current roster's capabilities, and drive absolute sales success across your entire organization.
This raises an important question, though, and it's a concept buried right near the end of the source material that completely reframes this entire discussion. The researchers note that true objection handling doesn't actually happen at the end of a deal.
Wait, what?
It begins during the very first discovery call.
Oh, this is the twist that caught me off guard. Let's dig into this.
It changes the entire paradigm. If a sales leader is constantly watching their reps battle severe, deal-killing objections at the 1-yard line, objections about fundamental value or missing features or budget misalignment, they have to ask themselves a hard question.
Which is
this really an objection handling problem? Or is the team's initial discovery process completely broken?
wow. Are you just putting Band-Aids on bullet holes that your own team shot into the deal during the very first meeting?
Precisely.
Yeah.
A massive objection at the final contract stage usually means that the reps spent the first 3 meetings doing a generic feature pitch, rather than deeply investigating the buyer's business model.
Yeah.
They didn't uncover the economic buyer early enough. They didn't ask about the legal procurement process. They assumed the budget was there without verifying it.
It goes right back to that check engine light analogy. If you do your initial discovery correctly, you run a full diagnostic on the entire car before you ever offer to fix it.
Right.
You map out the organizational risks, the budget constraints, and the procedural conditions on day 1. You don't wait for the engine to smoke during the final pricing negotiation to suddenly start asking diagnostic questions.
Exceptional discovery preemptively disarms objections before they ever form in the buyer's mind. If a rep deeply understands the buyer's cost of inaction from the first meeting, the final pricing presentation becomes a mutual confirmation of value rather than a hostile negotiation.
That is a phenomenal lens to view your pipeline through. Are your reps actually facing objections, or are they just facing the consequences of their own shallow discovery? Something critical to think about the next time you're dissecting a stalled deal in your pipeline review. Until next time, keep digging deeper.